Okay, welcome everyone. I'd like to call this public hearing to order. Ms. Carrera, roll call, please.
Mr. Schuster? Mr. Schuster? Mr. McAndrew?
Present.
Dr. Rothchild?
Here.
Mr. Donahue?
Here.
Mr. Gaughan?
Here, thank you. The purpose of said public hearing is to hear testimony and discuss the following. File of the council number 11, 2020, approving the transfer of a restaurant liquor license owned by Oak Street Express LLC, 610 North Main Street, Taylor, Lackawanna County, Pennsylvania, 18517. Restaurant liquor license number R-3114 to Arady Bev Beer LLC, otherwise known as the Mini Mart, 401 Wyoming Ave, Scranton, Lackawanna County, Pennsylvania, 18503, as required by the Pennsylvania Liquor Control Board. Please let the record reflect that there have been no comments received for this public hearing, and to that effect, this public hearing will be adjourned. Is there a motion to adjourn the public hearing?
Motion to adjourn.
Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 The ayes have it, and the public hearing is adjourned. Thank you, everyone. Okay, I'd like to welcome everyone to our caucus tonight. Today is Tuesday, July 7th, 2020. We have quite a few guests today. We're going to be discussing the proposed ordinance on our agenda that was drafted in coordination with the Pennsylvania Department of Economic Development to amend the city's Act 47 exit plan by extending the plan for 18 months until January 2022. So with us today, we have Jerry Cross from the Pennsylvania Economy League, Patty Moorhead from the Pennsylvania Economy League, Matt Dominus from the Pennsylvania Economy League. We have Jim Rose here from DCED. We have Carl Deely, our business administrator, and we also have our mayor, Paige Cognetti, with us as well. So I want to welcome all of you and thank you so much for coming. Mr. Cross and Pell has prepared a presentation to give to council. So I will turn it over to Mr. Cross, who's going to share his screen, and we'll let him get through his presentation. And then Mr. Cross and the other guests here today will take any questions that the council has. Okay, Jerry?
Thank you, Mr. Gaughan. I will put the presentation up now and we can start. Okay, thank you again for having us for the caucus to consider the plan amendment, the exit plan amendment for the city. I'm joined tonight by Matt Dominus of our staff, Patty Moorhead, our financial analyst of our staff, and Jim Rose, representing the Department of Community and Economic Development, of which the Pennsylvania Economy League works under as a coordinator for the city for Act 47. The reason for the ordinance tonight and consideration is that the state's fiscal code was amended in May 29 in 2020 in consideration of all the Act 47s municipalities that are facing an exit plan termination in the next 2 years. As you may know, the amendments to Act 47 obligated the creation of a time limit of 5 years or an extension of 3 years, after which time the distress determination would be dismissed or it would be terminated. However, the fiscal code amendment allowed for these municipalities to be eligible to have an 18-month extension in consideration of the possible fiscal impacts, the expected fiscal impacts of the COVID pandemic. Accordingly, the city is eligible for 18-month extension, and accordingly, we prepared an amendment for the council and city's consideration, allowing an extension of the time limit under the act. In 2020, before the amendment to the fiscal code, we were on a schedule to have a recommendation presented to the Secretary of DCD. The coordinator did so in March of 2020 and presented the same to the Commonwealth. At that time, the coordinator projected a balanced budget for 2020 and some slight deficits for 21 and 22, increasing to about almost $4 million deficit in 2023. We considered the four factors that we were required to consider under the act, and we found that the city met the requirements of all four factors to have termination of distress lifted by July of 2020, actually July 27th. We made that recommendation to the Secretary DCD prior to the full-blown impacts of the pandemic. Many of these projections were done by us in February and very early March. So these were pre the impacts of the pandemic. The original plan did show deficits. However, the deficits, in our opinion, were considered manageable. They're about 3%, a little bit more than that, 4% or so of the annual operating revenue by 2023. And we felt that given that's a reflection of increasing expenses through that time, that the city would have time to make corrective action and not require maintenance of a termination of the stress status. However, all that changed in the last 90 days. We attended a public hearing held by the Secretary of DCD, at which time we suggested that the Secretary consider the fact that the situation on the ground has changed. No one is quite sure what the impact of the coronavirus will be on the city's expenditures, at least not at this early date, revenues rather. So we suggested that there be some consideration of flexibility in the termination date. Following that, there was that amendment, Act 20 amendment to the fiscal code, and the eligibility for the city to apply, for the coordinator to determine an extension period of 18 months. In June and July, we took some best estimates, coupled with observations across the Commonwealth, coupled with discussions with the city administration, and we revised our estimates, the estimates that were presented in March. The specific assumptions that were changed affected revenues mostly. There was some impact on expenditures. We estimated the 2020 budget based on the first 3 to 4 months of expenditures, actually 5 months of experience. So we estimated the level of expenses and revenue. For earned income tax, which we expect will have the biggest immediate impact, and perhaps the one that you might see as early as August from the unemployment, we expected a 7.5% decrease in this year in the amount of earned income tax off a $30 million base. We would follow the 2020 experience with a 1% improvement, an increase in that money every year, and slightly down from the exit plan of 1.5%, but 1% increase. We consider the real estate taxes to be relatively unaffected by the pandemic. However, they are inherently decreasing because of the decay in the city's tax base based on the outdated assessments of the county. For the local services tax, we expected a decline of 5%. We estimated that rather. That would be a 5% decline in the number of jobs in the city. We then grew that number as a recovery measure of 1% annually. For the business privilege and mercantile tax, a similar profile was adopted. We used the same as budgeted in 2020 because that money is based on last year's sales. However, we did not consider a sharp increase in delinquencies. There was an extension to pay the tax through July 15th. We don't know the extent, so we kept that at the level of 2020. We don't know the impact of that extension will have on the ability for people to pay the tax or the rate of delinquencies. However, starting in 2021, because that tax is expected to occur on 2020 business, we instituted a 5% decrease in our assumptions. We held that number from 2021 constant for 2022 and 2023 under the business privilege and mercantile tax category. Revenue from real estate transfer is expected to be impacted. We assumed a 5% decrease in 2020 from that. We then held that number constant through 22 and 23. The refuse fee, we expected a reduction in the collected revenue by 5%, mirroring the reduction in the other line items that are perhaps more immediately impacted by increase in unemployment. We then held those constant throughout the next 2 to 3 years. So we did change the scope of the projected deficits substantially, whereas the deficits in 2020 are now at about a 4% rate when they were at 2023, a 4% rate. 2023, now the compounding of the slight growth expected in revenue and the normal increase in expenditures, there may be a impact as much as $8 million in 2023. We made a comparison on this slide, as you can see, that the expected change, you'll see that what was prior under the March report, a deficit situation 3 years out of $3 million some dollars is now advanced. If these revenue projections and estimates of the impact of the coronavirus hold true, and we won't know that for the rest till the rest of the year, this is the substantial increase in deficits over the projected manageable deficits in the original exit plan. Hence, the idea that an amendment to the exit plan would be necessary to enable the city to remain in Act 47 for the next 18 months and essentially to see the impact of the pandemic through 2021 and provide assistance regarding that. There is a formal ordinance in front of the council. It is a exit plan amendment, which means we actually replaced components of the existing exit plan with amended exit plan additions and replacements. Rather quickly, Chapter 2, the entire Chapter 2 was replaced, and that would be the revenue side. Chapter 3, which is the workforce chapter, that was updated to include workforce projections through 2022, and the tables and text were updated. The remainder of Chapter 3 will remain in effect as well as the new section. Chapter 10 was also replaced by the chapter in the new ordinance, the amendment chapter, and we added a new chapter called Chapter 11, which is essentially a language explaining the extension and a new date for termination of the city's status. We can conclude this presentation. I've used the last slide as a summary slide from what is in the ordinance language. We don't need to go through that now, but I'll leave it up while we answer questions.
Thank you.
Mr. Gaughan, if you have someone else that would like to present.
Yeah, sure. Thank you, Jerry. I just have a few questions. The first one, just when you were going through the slide, your 2020 estimated deficit is roughly $3.5 million. When the business administrator came before council to give us an update on some projections, they were estimating between $6 to $10 million deficit. How did you, I mean, I know you said how you arrived at it, but what is, I can't remember what the big difference there would be, why theirs would be so much higher in 2020 or so much higher in 2020 than what you're projecting.
I think maybe Mr. Deely can address those direct assumptions, but our assumptions were based on the length of time of the lockdown and unemployment and some more moderate, I think.
Yeah, Jerry, I think you've probably seen our model, which we are updating now on a monthly basis. And you say the assumptions are the key things here. As you say, how many weeks are in lockdown, the effect that has on the various revenue streams. So I think obviously what we need to do is maybe get in line with the assumptions that we have and what you've got in your forecast. And again, we've probably got a maybe more detailed look, I think, at some of the revenue streams that we should take into account.
Okay, thank you. Quick, another question. What, Jerry, this one would be for maybe you and Jim Rose. What would be the consequences if council did not adopt this ordinance amending the exit plan to include the 18-month extension?
Well, the amended plan replaces, if it's passed, replaces the existing exit plan. If it isn't passed, the exit plan that exists and adopted by the city remains in effect, and that would have the impact of a termination of Act 47 status at the end of this month. That's the simple, straightforward answer. I think Jim Rose could answer for the department side of the impact of a municipality leaving Act 47, but in our experience, that would be the end of the involvement of the coordinator and to a large extent the state's involvement in the Act 47 side of the equation.
And that's exactly right, Jerry. At that point, anything that the state was funding through Act 47 would have to stop immediately, because we can only, of course, provide funding for any Act 47 projects while the municipalities are still in Act 47. So if Act 47 were to end, I know that we're providing some legal assistance with some of the suits that are going on with the city. That would have to end.
Thank you.
What-
I have a question about on page 15 of the exit plan, you cite, which we're all very familiar with, the cost of employee health care. And it seems to go up every year, and it's a major expense of the cities. This question might be best posed to Mr. Dealey and Mayor Cognetti. What can be done or is being done to lower the cost of employee health care?
Yeah, obviously it's a major expense item, right, in the budget. It has been for kind of several decades. What we are doing right now is we are looking at the administration fees. So we have the opportunity to look at obviously those costs, and they're things that we can impact fairly quickly, you know, in terms of the contracts that we have on that. But then I think the larger question, right, is the individual benefit costs. We are, as you may be aware, going into negotiations with the clerical union starting this week, and that will be going on for obviously several months into the future. And that's really where I think where we need to address these issues, and obviously get some parity in terms of what are reasonable costs and reasonable services. So yeah, it's a big subject, and it's something obviously it's been probably talked about for many years. But you know, right now this is the time I think to start having those conversations.
Okay, thank you. Jerry, one of the recommendations in here moving forward is it says to utilize any new legislation that will assist the city with revenue enhancements or expenditure controls. Is there a chance that you might be more specific on this? Is there anything that you've seen other cities do or other distressed cities have done in terms of new legislation that would assist the city with revenue enhancements or expenditure controls that you can cite?
Well, we were referring to potential legislation that's been talked about both from the federal level and to an extent the state level. The state level would have some impact on changing rules around local government debt, the issuance of debt, perhaps ameliorating some of the deadlines for payment of short-term TAN loans, and perhaps even municipal obligations for pension. On the federal side, there's been continuous talk about another response that would involve local government and local government revenues from the state and the county. That hasn't happened yet, but as part of an exit plan that's drafted with a 18-month life, we felt it important that the city, as part of its exit strategy that it's working towards the exit, would need the ability in the exit plan to take advantage of those things and point to the plan as an adopted ordinance of the city, the amended plan, as a guide to its response. So in a sense, if there is a legislation that makes your life easier and ameliorates some of this revenue, obviously it's maybe kind of obvious to everyone. If there's legislation, you should take advantage of it. That's what we were thinking in that remark.
Okay. And final question for me, can you just kind of go through the workforce containment provisions, what that means to the city and how you arrived at those figures, just, to refresh everybody's memory on those?
I will ask Patty and Matt to join me in this conversation, but it is what we did is we extended out past the 2021 period the original projections for the bargaining units under Act 133. This city operates under limits for each collective bargaining unit. And because this plan would now extend through 2021, if it's approved, we felt compelled to put collective bargaining unit expense limits for the year 2021. We also projected the year 2022 with the understanding that the January termination of Act 47 in 2022 would perhaps make those numbers less effective. But this is a guide for negotiations, and Act 133 limits that the exit plan and prior to that, the recovery plan had maintained. So there are guides to negotiations for those contracts that are expiring in 2020, and also to some extent those in 2021 for negotiations. But those were included to update the Chapter 3 workforce to account for the extended time. The other department, the other initiatives in workforce remain unchanged, and I don't have those in front of me. They would be contained in the current exit plan that will remain unchanged.
Okay, thank you. Does anyone else have any questions for Mr. Cross or anyone else?
I have a few.
Is that Kyle?
Yes.
Hi, Kyle.
My first one is, Jim, would we be able to get a list of exactly what DCED funds under Act 47?
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Excuse me.
Jerry, what caused the dramatic shift in projections upwards in terms of expenditures in your presentation in 2020?
I think that was based, and Patty can answer this, she's on the line. I think that was based on our estimates of the city's experience going forward this year. Patty, could you elaborate on that? Because we recasted the 2020 budget. We accepted the 2020 budget as the baseline, and then we recast it with the 4 months of expenditure history.
Basically, that's it. We did go through what, based on the first 5 months of the year, we updated the numbers for the rest of the year. So anything that was running over a little bit in the beginning of the year would have added to the expenditure increases. But I didn't think, sorry.
Do you need me to move slides, Patty?
No, I have it. Yeah, I don't have the file up specifically, but it was based on the first 5 months of the year and the trends that were happening there, where the increases went in.
Because I think that what I remember from the presentation is that was about 2 million increase. It was 101 and change to 103 and change in your projections for 2020.
2020, 103, Kyle. I've got 103 expenditures in 2020. It's about $300,000. I've got 103,050,000, and I've got 103,350,000.
Was that what you still had 103 for in your March projection?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. March. Yeah. And let me, there it goes. I'm not quite sure how to advance when I'm sharing the screen, but we'll try to figure it out. I have to think where I am. There we are. That's 103. If you see the 2020, 103, 348 for July. And then for 2020 was
Okay.
103,050.
I'm sorry. It just must have been that just big decrease there. I'm sorry about that.
Yeah, that does, it threw me off today too, that 300,000, because it does look like a different, actually, and then you see the 99 million is really what draws your eye. That's
Yes.
the 3% reduction. That's what really throws that off.
So, and then, so what are the,
So now that I'm looking at it, I'm sorry, the 300,000 is employee direct compensation that was down
okay.
for the year.
Okay. Why are the revenues, do you keep that revenue projection then low across the board?
Well, we don't keep it low as much as we're trying to understand the city's history, recent history with revenues. As you remember, the real estate tax revenue is declining based on the loss of value of assessed valuation. And that was something we presented to council back in December when you were reviewing the the 2020 budget, and you voted to put a slight real estate tax increase in response to the deterioration of the base. What is happening here, I think, is a reduction to the base year. We're hitting 2020 with that 7.5% reduction in earned income tax. So you're bringing your base down by 4 million, and then you're growing your base revenues at a rate that doesn't necessarily overcome the loss of the assessed valuation. 2020, it's important to remember, we didn't just, there is 3-4 months of good revenue for the city. 6 months so far with good revenue for the city. We don't expect, and the city hasn't seen a large revenue drop off, but we do expect that to happen later this summer. So you'll see that that's a result of our reducing our estimated, applying those impacts against the real estate transfer, the LST, the earned income tax, the business privilege, and then carrying those lower bases going forward.
Kyle,
Okay.
Carl, this is Matt too. If you look up in our March numbers too, the revenues are pretty flat. And again, that goes back really to you're losing money every year with your real estate tax. So I think the trend in the July and March is basically the same. It's just at a lower number, as Jerry mentioned, because of the hit in revenues in 2020 that's going to take.
Yeah, and I get that, the first year why the revenues go, it's just trying to understand why, how much, what happened that your projections changed so much that, 21, 22, 23 are so much lower.
Well, Matt's correct, Kyle. You hit the base. When the base was reduced for 2020, down from 103 to what is it, 99,
Yeah.
that $4 million gap only can grow out so far. You've lost 4 million. Now you've got to recover that 4 million in growth to get even again. And unfortunately, given the assumptions that now some of those assumptions can very easily turn around. Remember, we're only talking an 18-month extension of the recovery plan. No one really knows the impact, and we'll not know until July 2021 what the real impact of this thing is on real estate and on earned income tax and jobs. So we're holding these things constant. It could just as easily turn around in the earned income tax, resume its normal rate of growth. The LST unaffected, and perhaps business privilege is not as bad as people think. But those are assumptions I don't know, and we're going with a more conservative estimate to give the city as much of a head start as possible towards understanding this.
Well, it might help looking at it as that revenue that is being lost is just lost, and it just brings you all that growth that to get to the $103,000 that was projected in March was accumulated over years, but now that whole system's taken a hit. So it's really getting reduced down. Now it's got to build back up until it gets to 103,000 again. That's going to take some time because it took a while to get there. It's just lost revenue. It just reduces the whole base, and it's hard to grow out of it.
Lost revenue requires either expenditure reductions or increase in revenue on other sources, which is a dilemma.
That brings me, I guess, to my next question, since you brought up LST.
Mm-hmm.
So in terms of extending the exit plan, is it either you extend for the full 18 months or you extend not at all?
That's how we read the legislation, that you're eligible for an 18-month extension.
I mean, but would we be able to extend it in 6-month increments?
I think, Kyle, honestly, there is always the opportunity, and Matt can correct me, Jim Rose more importantly can correct us since he represents the Commonwealth. The coordinator always has the ability to amend an exit plan or an amended exit plan. We are the ones that have the ability to amend both the recovery plan and exit plan, an amended plan. So while you have an extension granted to you on the maximum time allowed, as coordinator, if things do improve, and it seems that a lot of the assumptions and revenue didn't generate, then I think we could talk about amending the amended exit plan and doing a recommendation to the secretary. But I'd have to get some legal advice on that, given that the
Well, yeah. And I mean, this is only why I'm asking is because we still haven't had our LST hearing. And that's concerning to me because if there is an approval for that, I mean, that's a loss of about 3.2 million, not only this year, but then possibly next year.
the LST tax is an Act 47 tax, but that will remain after you exit Act 47.
But the difference between being in Act 47 and not being in Act 47 is not being in Act 47, you don't need court approval
Correct.
for tripling the LST as long as your pension systems are distressed, correct?
Correct.
That's why I'm asking about, you know, a 6 month, possibly a 6 month increment in it, just because we wouldn't be tying our hands then to that lost revenue for next year. And we see how that all plays out, and we see how our revenue projections come in. We see how our 2021 budget formulation progresses.
Well, I'll tell you, the statute says the amendment 1604-D.1, it says shall be eligible for an 18 months extension beyond the time limit imposed under section 254. You know, that's a pretty straight reading there. It doesn't say or less or more. It doesn't give much leeway. So, you know, DCD's on the line. I don't know if they have an opinion or if Jim has to run this by their office, but we've been told by DCD this is 18 months. No more, no less.
And Matt, that's my understanding too. As it is written up currently, it is for an 18-month extension.
Okay, any other questions, Kyle?
No, that's it for right now.
Okay, does anybody else have any questions for Mr. Cross or anyone else on the line?
I do. So given the extra 18 months to get our house in order, you know, to exit recovery, understanding that, you know, 7.5% decrease in earned income tax is gone forever. You lose it, it's gone. And the yearly decrease in real estate taxes. And I heard some of this, but what will be the main focus, like the top three in these 18 months to be focused on to bring us back where we need to be to exit recovery?
I think the top focus would be to help the city understand and plan for the impact. You're right. The EIT for this year will go away, but God willing, those people that were furloughed or laid off by government order would come back to work, and your growth would, your EIT would grow again and fill in some of that gap. But 2021 is going to be a difficult year, I believe, for anyone. It seems that there's maybe a second wave. This is only the first wave we're in, and I don't know that any governments have a real good handle on this. So I think your biggest goal is to understand as best as you can for the 2021 budget. Also to maintain a really hard look at expenditures and service levels. You are going to be faced, regardless of whether you're in Act 47 or not, with a built-in escalation of expenditures of about 3% annually. Most of your value in expenses is in wages and salaries. That can only be impacted by the large amount of your workforce through collective bargaining. You have a window coming up on collective bargaining to discuss with the unions in good faith the situation the city finds itself into. You have the necessity for evaluating the processes and those functions in city government that could be changed, that may need to be changed. You have several studies going on right now. Those are the three main items I would argue a healthy government would be looking for in normal times, and a stressed government in what's going to be a difficult 18 months should be putting on the priority on the table.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councilman McAndrew. Does anyone else have any questions for Mr. Cross or anyone else on the line?
Yes, I do.
Councilman Schuster, go ahead.
Yeah, so does the administration have any concrete plans on the use of the extension, such as like a timeline for actions, things, I guess kind of building off what Mark had said there, but I know it was talked about maybe possibilities for short-term borrowing. I know there was smoothing over of the MMOs with the pensions. I know there was some talk about mid-year TANs, things like that. And Mr. Rose also said he gave like one example of an Act 47 service that the state would help us with. Do we have any more examples of those and concrete plans that we're going to use this extension for?
So, Mr. Schuster, do you want to have Mr. Rose answer that, or do you want me to answer from an administration standpoint first?
Both, if you could.
Okay. So for us, looking at the next 18 months, to Mr. Cross's point, we need all of the tools that we can have at our hands to figure out what's coming at us. So working with Pell, working with DCED is extremely helpful in understanding, because Pell and DCED, especially, Mr. Cross and Pell have been with us, for so long, understanding the real root of all of the different projections, the different financial issues that we have, having history that some of us don't have in the actual city on some of these other things that whether it's contracts or past financial transactions we've done. Having Pell with us to help guide us through this is helpful, because they know Scranton, also because they're working along with DCD with cities all across the state, in the same way that Mr. Deely and Mr. Sheridan work with business administrators from across the eastern part of the state. The more tools, the more information we have from other cities about what they're expecting, what they're navigating, the more information flow we have between the state and us, the better we are equipped to understand what we're dealing with, what might be coming down the pike, what trends are happening in other cities, maybe before us, or what are things that we should be lobbying for. So that's the broad stroke. In the more granular, we really need Pell's help looking at some of our tax structure and tax structure changes, and that includes the payroll prep tax conversion. The reason that a 6-month extension doesn't help us is we need the certainty, and the school district needs the certainty of the 18 months so that we can try to make that conversion. We cannot act unilaterally, that we have to have the school district act in concert with us. And a 6-month extension doesn't help get us there, because that doesn't help the school district. They need more time than that, and so do we. So the payroll prep tax is the real concern. That's much more of a concern, getting to that more progressive and modern tax. That's more concerning to me than anything to do with the other taxes mentioned. And then things like expenditures and service levels, policies that the city should be already implementing, that we can continue to work on, a debt management policy, those types of things. We're trying to dig out of all of these things. We want to work on these things with the exit plan. The more help we have from Pell, from DCED, the better it'll enable us to use this time to be able to get some of these things rolling that should have happened quite some time ago.
All right, before we get to Mr. Rose, when it comes to the school district, did the language in the legislation change to allow the school district to do that at any point in time, or that hasn't occurred yet?
In the Act 40, that would be a separate legislation, wouldn't it?
Yeah, wasn't there a recent language change that allows the school district to change without the city being in Act 47? Or is that still being worked on?
Councilman, I believe the fiscal code was amended specifically for that a school district can have a payroll prep tax on its own for, I believe it was unique to Scranton.
Okay. And then has there still been conversation with the school district about this? Or when was the last time we had conversation with the school district about this changeover?
So Mr. Deely, Mr. Sheridan have been in touch with Mr. Laffey at the school district. Mr. Sheridan was working on an assessment to get our baseline. So that is going forward. We haven't had a legal conversation with them since in the last few weeks, since the different legislative pieces have come together, but we certainly will.
Okay, I know that the school district we're still waiting on some of the numbers that were going to be coming out of Berkheimer. The previous administration was saying that there were some pretty accurate numbers when it came to looking at the payroll prep. I don't know, has Mr. Lappy had a chance to look at those, or have they been reviewed with the school district so they know where we're at regarding those numbers?
We are certainly in touch about a variety of things. We haven't dug into this in the last month or so. There's been a lot of other things that are more pressing for us. Like I said, we need the time, we need the certainty of that time. We need this extension for 18 months so that we can make sure that we can get this done, or at least make the best attempt possible with the school district to get it done.
Yeah, I'd encourage that, because I know where it last left off, there were still a lot of unanswered questions there from the school district. And one thing just to throw in there, Mr. Dealey talked about the health care with the city and maybe looking at administrative costs. And I was going to bring it up last week, and I think this is something that you know as well. The city and the school district use Millennium.
Mm-hmm.
Correct.
Yeah.
And that's probably a possibility there for some
It
shared
is.
service.
So every contract that we have right now is being reviewed, and any opportunities that we get where we can reduce expenditures, you can be assured that we are looking at every line item.
Yeah, and that goes back to those shared services talks where we're identifying some cost savings. So that would be great if we could do something like that.
You are correct, Councilman. Yeah.
Okay.
I just want to bring up.
Go, Kyle, sorry.
I would just like
to let you know, we have about 4 minutes left before we have to start a regular meeting. Go ahead, Kyle.
Yes, I just want to bring up just a concern with pushing payroll prep into next year is then you get into the previous year's baseline number, which will be lower if we wait to do that another year.
That is true, but we have to go with the school district. We have to work with them. So we will continue to work with them on it. And the last thing I'd want to see is to cut ourselves short and not accept this extension, or only have this extension for a short period of time.
Okay, anyone else? Any other questions?
So when it comes to,
I just want to add, since all the other council members spoke, I think my questions have been answered. I do hope that we're in a better position in 18 months, or at least we know what we're dealing with in terms of revenue loss, and if these projections are what we estimate them to be right now. But if we're in a worse position, then I don't know where that leaves us with everything. I know we're going to do everything possible to try to make up for that. So I think I can understand the extended time needed for several reasons. But yeah, I think I'm good with everything. So thank you for coming to our caucus and providing all the information and details.
Thank you.
Okay, great. Well, we're right at the end of the caucus, so I want to thank the representatives from Pell, Mr. Cross, Mayor Cognetti, Business Administrator Dealey, the representatives from DCED. Thank you so much for all of your help in your presentation. And we will certainly are considering this tonight and over the next 2 weeks. And we look forward to continuing to work with you. Okay.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. And we will start our regular meeting in 1 minute at 6:30. So if everybody wants to stick around here. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'd like to call this public meeting of Scranton City Council to order. If everyone could please now stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge of allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. If everyone could please remain standing for a moment of silent reflection for servicemen and women throughout the world, and also for those who have passed away recently in our community. Let us also tonight take a special moment, as we have for the last few months, of silence for people in our community and throughout the world who are suffering or who have passed away from the coronavirus. Let us think about them and their families at this time, that they may find peace. Let us think now about the doctors, nurses, researchers, and all medical professionals and first responders who seek to heal and help those affected and who put themselves at risk in the process. May they find protection and peace. Whether we are home or abroad, surrounded by many people suffering from this illness or only a few, let us stick together endure together, mourn together, persist and prepare together, and in place of our anxiety, let us continue to hope and find peace. Thank you very much. Ms. Carrera, roll call, please. Oh, hold on 1 second. Ms. Carrera, roll call, please.
Mr. Schuster.
Sorry, Lori, roll call, please. I don't know when Ms. Carrera went.
Thank you, Councilman Gaughan. Mr. Schuster,
Present.
Mr. McAndrew,
Present.
Dr. Rothchild,
Here.
Mr. Donahue,
Here.
Mr. Gaughan.
Here, thank you. Mrs. Reed, if you could please dispense with the reading of the minutes.
Third order, 3A, Single Tax Office City Funds Distributed Comparison Report 2019-2020, year-to-date June 30, 2020. 3B, Scranton Lackawanna Health and Welfare Authority 2019 Combined Audit Report. 3C, correspondence received June 29, 2020 from Office of Economic and Community Development regarding City of Scranton Small Business Relief Program Summary of Grant Awards. 3D, correspondence received from Mayor Paige G. Cognetti dated June 30, 2020 regarding technical review of permit for Keystone landfill expansion. 3E, correspondence received from City Planner dated July 1, 2020 regarding proposed amendment to zoning ordinance floodplain management regulations.
Thank you, Mrs. Reed. Are there any comments on any of the third order items? I just want to briefly mention that I had a chance to read the mayor's letter to the DEP on the expansion of the landfill, and I appreciate her coming out against it and issuing a letter to DEP. And I think it is very powerful that you have not only the city council, but you have the mayor of Scranton as well, joining together with the council of Dunmore and other councils throughout the county and public officials throughout the county who have stepped up to say very loudly and very clearly that we do not want to see the expansion of the landfill. So it's my hope that when you have Senator Casey, when you have Congressman Cartwright, other elected officials step up in this community, that DEP will actually take those seriously. So again, I want to thank the mayor for issuing that letter. Anyone else have any comments on the third order items?
I do. When looking at 3E, we have an amendment to the zoning ordinance for the floodplain. And in that correspondence, it says some of the maps have been changed. Do we know how much change has occurred with the floodplain maps, or have any of the floodplains changed?
That I don't know, Councilman Schuster, off the top of my head, but that would be a question for Mr. King, the city planner. I do know that the law department is in possession of the draft ordinance to update the floodplain or the zoning ordinance rather. So we're probably going to see that. I don't know if it will be before the recess, but definitely I think before the end of the year. But yeah, that would Mr. King would definitely have the answer to that.
Okay, do you think we should ask for that? Do you think we'll get it coming up?
You can certainly ask for that. I do think we'll get it, but if you want to pose that question to him, I'm certain that he would have the answer.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else? Okay, if not, received and filed. Do any council members have any announcements at this time?
I do. I have a couple. So Tuesday, July 14th, Friends of the Poor, Family to Family, and Weinberg Food Bank will be hosting a COVID-19 emergency walk-up Shopper's Choice food giveaway at St. Luke's Episcopal Church on 232 Wyoming Avenue, Scranton, PA, from 1 to 4 p.m. Also, there will be a limited free delivery to downtown residents. As always, please note zip code, number of children, adults, and elderly in household are required. Secondly, Penn Foster, which is a local business here, Penn Foster Social Impact Committee is looking for local or remote volunteer opportunities to provide to their employees. Each employee gets one paid volunteer day per year. They encourage their employees to participate. They would like this information by this Friday. I know that, there's not a lot of opportunities to volunteer because of COVID, but, I'm reaching out to my colleagues or citizens out there that know of any opportunities. Please, you can email me at McAndrew at scrantonpa.gov. Thank you. That's all I have.
Thank you, Councilman McAndrew. Anyone else have any announcements?
I just have one, not an announcement, but just a reminder that garbage and recycling pickup is one day behind this week due to the 4th of July holiday, and recycling is cardboard this week. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilman Donahue. Anyone else? Okay. At this time, I want to make one announcement, and usually we do this in the caucus, but it is very important. We didn't have a chance tonight because we had Pell-in. So there was a meeting today with officials from all over the county regarding recycling. And Solicitor Hayes had the opportunity to attend that meeting. Last week, we had requested that Solicitor Hayes attempted to secure a copy of the current recycling agreement and provide an analysis regarding it. So Solicitor Hayes, would you mind at this time to provide an update on that? Oh, sorry, Kevin, you're muted.
Councilman Gaughan, members of council. So on June 10, 2002, Scranton City Council passed a resolution authorizing the city to enter an agreement with the Lackawanna County Solid Waste Management Authority in order to participate in the disposal of recyclable materials. The agreement was entered on September 19, 2002 for a 10-year term, and accordingly, the agreement expired in 2012, and no subsequent agreement has been located. So the first question the first answer I could give you is that there's no current agreement in place between the city of Scranton and the authority. However, I was able to secure a professional service operating agreement, which was entered on May 3rd, 2006 between the Lackawanna County Recycling Center and the Lackawanna County Solid Waste Management Authority. And according to the Department of State, the Lackawanna County Recycling Center, Inc. is a registered corporation with Louis DeNaples identified as its president and Dominic DeNaples identified as its vice president. The purpose of this agreement was to engage the operator to manage the Lackawanna County Recycling Center, which, as you all know, is located at 3400 Boulevard Avenue in Scranton, which is owned by the authority. The initial term of this agreement was set for 5 years, starting on May 3, 2006, and expiring on May 3, 2011. Thereafter, the agreement was automatically renewed had the ability to be automatically renewed for 4 additional 5-year terms under the same terms and conditions, unless the operator notified the authority that it wished to terminate the agreement at least 6 months prior to the expiration of the existing term. So the agreement provides for additional terms up to 2031. It appears that the current term would expire on or about May 3rd, 2021. The agreement provides that the operator should use its best efforts in the management and operation of the recycling center so that its services will be operated and maintained in an efficient and business-like manner to maximize the potential and capacity to accept, process, and market recyclable commodities. The authority is required to use its best efforts to provide the operator with the same number of prisoners from the Lackawanna County Prison that have historically worked at the recycling center as part of their work release program, as long as security requirements are provided. Lastly, the operator warrants and agrees that during the term of the agreement and any renewal or extension thereof, the recycling center shall continue to accept the recyclable commodities currently being accepted at the time of the agreement, that being May 3, 2006, and at the pricing level in effect at March on March 24, 2005, or as modified by the authority. So that's just a high-level overview of the agreement between the authority and the operator, which is known as Lackawanna County Recycling Center, Inc.
Now, Solicitor Hayes, I understand that there was a meeting today with county representatives regarding the changes to the county's recycling program. You attended that meeting today. Do you have any updates with regard to that meeting?
Sure. Yes, I did it upon council's request. I attended today's meeting with representatives of the county. Specifically, representatives from all the municipalities were requested to participate in today's meeting so that the county could provide an update on its current recycling program. Along with myself, DPW Director Tom Preamble and Acting Solicitor Joe O'Brien were also there for the city. The county officials reported to the municipalities that there will be a change in the recycling program, which is brought on by current market conditions, as well as the COVID-19 pandemic. Specifically, the current pandemic has caused the county to suspend the program of sending Lackawanna County prison inmates to work at the recycling center. It is my understanding that I shouldn't say suspend, it's been terminated, because they're not going to resume it even if we were in the clear and the pandemic was no longer a factor. They're not going to resume that at any point in time. As a result, the operator of the recycling center has reported that it will need to hire additional personnel to fulfill the duties which were being performed by inmates. And I know Councilman Schuster had asked me to find out what percentage of the workforce was comprised of inmates. And I did ask that, and I was told that it's the majority, and specifically it's the inmates are routinely assigned to handle the commingled recyclables. It's in the range of 12 to 22 inmates. None now, but that's what was typically in place prior to our current situation. So as a result, the operator has made the determination that they are going to have to charge the municipalities for the receipt of certain recyclable materials. Specifically, the operator issued a notice to the authority, which was dated Monday, and indicated that effective July 20 of this year, so effective July 20 of 2020, municipalities will be required to follow this fee schedule. At a rate of $40 per ton, the operator will accept commingled recyclables collected, including clean, non-contaminated bimetal cans, aluminum cans, PET and LDPE and HDPE plastic, and along with glass bottles and jars, all at a rate of $40 per ton, which would be billed monthly to the municipality. They also give the option that at $20 per ton, they would accept all those commingled recyclables, except they will not accept glass. No glass jars, no glass bottles. The operator will continue to accept commingled, will continue to accept newsprint, office paper, and cardboard at no charge. In addition, if a resident wants to deliver commingled recyclables that are free of glass, they can deliver those at no charge. But that's the program that's the proposal that was issued on Monday. Now today, while this meeting was taking place, I got an email message from someone with the county who indicated that the operator will honor this price and schedule commencing on July 20, 2020 and continue at minimum through December 31, 2021. So till December of next year. And that the municipalities will be billed monthly for recyclables accepted at the center, but the payment term is amended to defer payment, the payment due date to the earlier of the receipt of grant type funding or January 30, 2021. So in other words, if there's grant, the county seems to believe that there'll be grant money available to reimburse the counties. if that grant money is not available, we would, payment would be due on January 30, 2021. Lastly, they indicated that, and this was an issue that was raised today by some of the other municipalities and by Tom Preamble, I have to say. The county indicated, or the operator indicated that fresh yard waste, including leaves, grass clippings, small trimmings that are delivered by municipalities to the center in biodegradable brown paper bags will be accepted for a 2-month trial period commencing on July 20, 2020 and ending on September 18, 2020.
Now,
If it is, yeah.
sorry.
So that was an issue, a major issue that was raised by a number of the municipalities, that they're no longer accepting the brown bags, which hold the clippings and all, and the leaves.
Now, you indicated earlier that under the current agreement that the county was required to make its best effort to provide the operator with prisoners to perform work at the recycling center. Do you know why is this forming the basis for this change in pricing, which is being passed then on to the municipalities and the residents?
Right. So that was an issue I raised at the meeting. I had read the agreement to say that as long as the county made its best efforts to supply the inmate workforce that was in place at the time of the agreement, then it would be complying with the agreement. It was reported to me by the officials from the county that the authority's solicitor had offered the opinion that by suspending the supply of inmate workers, that the authority had effectively breached the contract and that it was now null and void.
Do you know who the board members are and who the authority's solicitor is for the Solid Waste Management Authority?
So I met one of the board members today. The chairman was there, and his name is escaping me. I don't know the other board members, but I could tell you the solicitor is Attorney Tom Cummings.
Okay, and is that Attorney Cummings, who previously served as a solicitor for the Borough of Dunmore when the borough approved the revised host agreements with the landfill?
I believe it is. I believe that's the same Tom Cummings, yes.
And is that the same attorney who also acted as special counsel during the Scranton Sewer Authority sale and who was paid over $225,000 in connection with the sale?
I believe, I don't know what I can't verify what any attorneys were paid as part of that deal, but I believe that Attorney Cummings was the borough solicitor, the solicitor for the Borough of Dunmore and its special counsel for that sewer deal when that all took place. So yeah, I believe that's all the same attorney, yes.
So just a few things. I won't spend too much time on this because I know we're still in the announcements part of it, and I wanted to get to this in the caucus, but we ran out of time. But the information that you provided today, Kevin, first, I appreciate you attending the meeting. It is concerning. It seems to me like now that the citizens of Scranton are going to have to pay for recycling because the recycling center can't use prison labor. I mean, that to me, that is what, it does not make a whole lot of sense to me. And I do think the arrangement needs to be scrutinized very closely. So after looking at some of the documents that you would send us, I would like, and I'll make a motion to this effect tonight, if my colleagues agree, for you to draft a letter from the council to the Board of Commissioners requesting confirmation on a number of issues related to the recycling center. First, I'd like for you to determine whether the May 3rd, 2006 agreement is in fact null and void. Specifically, I'd like to know what is the basis for determining that the agreement has become null and void. Secondly, I'd like to request confirmation as to why the authority is permitting the operator to refuse to accept certain recyclable commodities which the agreement requires them to accept at the same pricing level. Also, I'd like confirmation that the authority has obtained a legal opinion that the authority has breached the agreement by its failure to supply prisoners from the Lackawanna County Prison as workers for the recycling center. I'd also like confirmation from the commissioners as to whether the authority has issued an actual notice of default to the operator for failing to accept recyclable commodities which were accepted on May 3rd, 2006 at the pricing structure in effect on March 24th, 2005. I'd also like confirmation as to whether the authority has taken an actual official vote to authorize the operator to amend the recyclable commodities, which it will accept in the pricing structure in effect on March 24, 2005. And I would like to know the names of all current authority members.
I'll second that.
Same here.
So I'll make an actual motion tonight during the meeting. But that would be my comments right now on that. So thank you for the update. So I do actually have a few other announcements, if I may, for a second. A public caucus will be held with Scranton tomorrow, July 21st, for an update on their activities. I know several citizens have requested an update from Scranton tomorrow, so they'll be here July 21st. A public caucus will also be held Tuesday, July 28th, with representatives from NDC for the purposes of receiving our quarterly parking garage update. So they usually come, they haven't been here in a while because of the pandemic, so they'll give us an update on what's been going on with the parking garages July 28th. I made this announcement last week, but I just want to repeat once again that our July council meetings will continue to be held via Zoom. Under Governor Wolf's orders, public meetings may continue to run remotely. Out of an abundance of caution, as I mentioned last week, we're going to continue to face COVID-19 and all of the issues that go along with that. So we want to be as cautious and as careful as possible. So we'll continue to run the meetings through Zoom until the end of July. We have an August recess. We'll reassess the situation then going into September. As always, if anyone would like to comment on agenda items or city business, please send those comments in writing to our city clerk, Lori Reed, by emailing lreed@scrantonpa.gov. Council will accept public comment until the day of our meeting, which is Tuesday at 4:30 p.m. And public comment is reviewed by the council prior to our meeting and is placed on the official record and in the minutes of our meetings. Our agenda is being posted for public review the Friday before our Tuesday meetings, and the agenda and minutes can be accessed by going to the city's webpage, www.scrantonpa.gov, and clicking on the city council page. Does anybody else have any other announcements at this time? And Mrs. Reed, fourth order.
Thank you. Fourth order, citizens' participation.
Thank you. Would someone please make a motion to accept public comment from the following individuals? Deborah Newhouse, I hope I'm pronouncing her last name correctly. Patricia Nestor, Marie Decker, Leonard Shoemaker, Marie Schumacher, Faye Franis, and Mary Lorraine Craig.
I'll make a motion to accept public comment.
Thank you, Councilman Schuster. Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, there's been a second on the question.
On the question, there were, as in previous weeks, a lot of comments regarding fireworks. Solicitor Hayes, we're waiting on what the state legislator is going to do, and then all that legislation is going to be built into one in terms of increasing the fine and hopefully being able to ban the use of them altogether. But we're just waiting on the state legislator to pass that, right, before we get those down.
Right. So, Councilman Donahue, the Senate overwhelmingly passed a bill that would allow certain cities, which includes Scranton, to essentially prohibit the use of consumer fireworks within their limits by passing a ordinance or resolution no sooner than 60 days after the effective date of the legislation. So, my understanding is that the General Assembly is now on summer break. So, unfortunately, it still has to pass the House. It seems, based on the comments by the governor, that he would be supportive of the legislation, as he wants local control over the issue of fireworks. So, once we have that, we will have the ability to put serious restrictions on fireworks in the city of Scranton. And both myself and Solicitor Joe O'Brien are monitoring that closely.
I just wanted to make the point of that it's not like we're not acting. We're waiting for the state legislator to give us the authority to act so that we could act correctly and all in one piece of legislation.
Right. There's no sense in us passing legislation at this point in time when it's, it essentially will be obsolete within a few months. So as soon as we have that bill in place, we can act, and we will, according to your directive.
So I strongly encourage residents to reach out to both State Representative Flynn and Mullins to encourage them to support that legislation. That's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilman Donahue. Anyone else on the question?
Yes, on the question, in response to one of the questions we received in citizens participation, and it's something too that was on the agenda that I missed in third order, and they'd asked regarding the updates from OECD for the COVID-19 grants, the business grants that were given, and there were many applicants that were deemed ineligible, and they asked for the reasoning of that. And so those people did not meet the eligibility criteria, some of the basic criteria, like owning your business within the city of Scranton, also not owing any money on taxes to the city of Scranton. So if any businesses are looking to still apply for the grants or the loans, they please pay attention to the criteria that's there before you apply.
Okay, thank you so much. Anyone else on the question? All right, all those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
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 The ayes have it, and so moved. Thank you. Mrs. Reed.
Fifth order, 5A motions.
Thank you, Mrs. Reed. Councilman Schuster, do you have any motions or comments at this time?
With citizens participation, did we add that email in there about the 1600 block of Sanderson Ave? I know there were some concerns that were sent in about that property.
Yeah, I actually spoke to the gentleman who wrote the complaint. I spoke to him on the phone, and I know, Laura, you had sent that along to the Licensing and Inspections Department, correct?
Correct.
Yeah, that's been sent.
Okay, thank you. I was going to ask for that, and thank you, Mrs. Reed, for helping out with that phone call, and also Solicitor Hayes for following up with my question about recycling. That's all.
Thank you, Councilman Schuster. Councilman McAndrew, do you have any motions or comments at this time?
Yeah, I have a couple. So, as chairman of Public Safety Committee, I would like to applaud the Scranton Police Department and their detectives for the apprehension and arrest of the juvenile male for the homicide of the poor young lady that, was killed in West Side last month. Great work, guys. Secondly, it was brought to my attention by a few concerned citizens the activities occurring under the pavilion at the River Heritage Trail on Olive Street that entail homeless people. There's fighting, yelling, cursing, urinating in public, drug deals going down, and overdosing a couple people. So, of course, I sympathize with our city's homeless population, but this appears to be a public safety issue that needs to be addressed or at least assessed by the city. So, Mrs. Reed, would you please send a letter to city's administration, to help try to rectify this situation for our citizens and get help, the help needed for the individuals that are involved. And thirdly, I would like to also report on the motion I made 2 weeks ago, the Hometown Heroes Banner Initiative. I've been in communication with the mayor, and we'll be meeting with representatives from VFWs and the like in the upcoming weeks. I'd like to see this initiative through to recognize our own hometown heroes and hopefully bring everyone in the city together during this process. And that is all I have. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilman McAndrew. Dr. Rothchild, do you have any motions or comments?
Yes, just real quick, I just want to say that I'm happy to see in our legislation tonight the resolution for the fireworks. It's something obviously that I've brought up several times over the past few weeks, and that citizens are really concerned about and have been coming to us with, just because of how dangerous they can be. It's really difficult to follow the orders to be 150 feet away from structures, especially in a city like ours. I know that it's been, a torment in many of the neighborhoods. So just happy to see that we have that, and looking forward to being able to enforce it better.
Thank you so much, Dr. Rothchild. Councilman Donahue, any motions or comments?
Just to add to what Dr. Rothchild said about the fireworks and what, a little bit of our discussion before, that as soon as we are given the authority to act and to ban fireworks, I'm sure that this council and the mayor will, sign that legislation. So it's important to reach out to your state representatives. And then just briefly on this, on the recycling program, the fact that they're going to charge us $40 a ton is pretty laughable to me. And I know that Councilman Gaughan is going to make a motion to send correspondence to the county commissioners, but I'd like to just make a motion just to urge to send correspondence to the administration, urging them to start developing specs and an RFQ and or RFP so that we can start exploring and shopping our options in terms of where we bring our recycling. I mean, if they're going to charge us $40, we might as well, $40 a ton, we might as well see if we can get a better rate somewhere else.
I'll second that.
That's all I have.
Okay, there's been a motion and a second on the question. All those in favor of Councilman Donahue's motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. The ayes have it, and so moved. Thank you. Anything
And
else?
that's all I have. I mean, I have a comment on the Act 47, but I'll wait until that legislation comes up.
Okay, thank you. I have a few items. First, as Councilman Donahue mentioned, and as we talked about in the first part of the meeting, I would like to make a motion at this time that the City Council send a letter to the Lackawanna County Board of Commissioners requesting the following information. First, to determine whether the May 3rd, 2006 agreement is in fact null and void. Specifically, I'd like to know what is the basis for determining that the agreement between the Recycling Center and Lackawanna and the Solid Waste Management Authority has become null and void. Secondly, would request confirmation as to why the authority is permitting the operator to refuse to accept certain recyclable commodities, which the agreement requires them to accept at the same pricing level. Third, confirmation as to whether the authority has issued a notice of default to the operator for failing to accept recyclable commodities, which were accepted on May 3rd, 2006 at the pricing structure in effect on March 24th, 2005. I'd like to have confirmation that the authority has obtained a legal opinion that the authority has breached the agreement by its failure to supply prisoners from the Lackawanna County Prison as workers for the recycling center. I'd like confirmation as to whether the authority has taken an official vote to authorize the operator to amend the recyclable commodities which it will accept and the pricing structure in effect on March 24th, 2005. And I'd also like names of the current current members of the Solid Waste Management Authority. Is there a second?
Second.
On the question? On the question, as I want to again thank Solicitor Hayes for attending this meeting. I was just made aware of this meeting a day or two ago. So, I mean, I don't know how that works. To not let elected officials know or wait until the last second is, to me, unbelievable. As Councilman Donahue mentioned, now that we're in the middle of a pandemic, we had our business administrator in a few weeks ago stating that we may have between a $6 to $10 million deficit. The Pennsylvania Economy League was just here showing that we may have deficits at the end of this year and for the next few years because of the pandemic. And now the recycling center notifies us and the county notifies us that the citizens of Scranton may have to start paying for recycling. And the reason, and Solicitor Hayes, correct me if I'm wrong, but is the reason they gave because they could not use prison labor? Is that the sole reason, or is there another reason that they gave that I'm missing?
I think that there is ongoing issues on the market issues because of China not accepting recyclable materials as much as they used to. But I think the impetus of this specific action was the pulling back and the suspension of the prisoner program.
As I said, I would like this information from the county commissioners. I think that this whole arrangement needs to be scrutinized very closely. And I'm looking forward to getting answers to these questions quickly. Anyone else on the question?
Just Councilman Gaughan, I have to say, the director of the recycling program, Barbara Giavagnoli, and as well as Chief of Staff Brian Jeffers, they fielded all of our questions and stayed actually after the meeting and met with myself and Tom Preamble, and Mrs. Giavagnoli, who is the recycling coordinator, offered to come to any work session we have with any questions, and she could probably give you a better description as to what market conditions are maybe impacting this agreement.
Yeah, sure. That'd be great, Mrs. Reed, if you can set that up. In the meantime, I do think it's also important to get these questions answered in writing as well in terms of the actions that the authority took. But yeah, Mrs. Reed, if you can reach out to her and set that up, and if we could, even if we have to schedule a special caucus, I think it's that important. That would be great. Anyone else?
I would like to just expand on that for 1 second. First off, we do get grant money that comes in for our recycling program based on the amount of tonnage we do recycle. If that has to go towards, paying some sort of tipping fee or fee to actually recycle, that takes away from the, what you could put into the trucks and the infrastructure that we have on our end. And then also on that point, I meant to mention it in fifth order, but just because we're not picking up recycling currently, doesn't mean that you can't recycle the aluminum or the glass on your own. If you were to take aluminum cans to a place like Fiegelman's or any local scrapyard, that number from Fiegelman's, for example, will be sent to the city in establishing our total number of recyclables that determines our grant money. So it's not only the recycling that goes through the recycling center, it's also the ones that go around the local scrapyards as well, that count towards our grant allocation.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else on the question?
Yeah, I just have something quick. It's just ironic to me that, now we got to pay for recycling to the same company that we paid for buses that didn't transport students during COVID. I just see that. I don't see the fairness in this. That's all I have.
Thank you, Councilman Schuster. Anyone else on the question? All those in favor of the motion sending the letter signify by saying aye.
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 Aye. The ayes have it, and so moved. I just have a few other comments. First, I asked a few weeks ago for the administration to answer questions about NRS. I had specific questions that we had sent. I know that I spoke to Solicitor Hayes, and those questions have not been answered to date. I do think it's important that we get answers to those questions. This is directly from a letter that was sent in May or actually May of, I believe, last year in 2019. So I think it's important to make sure that NRS has done all of the things that the previous administration had asked them to do and provided all of the information that was requested at that time. So I'm still looking forward to the answer to those questions. Also, in terms of Third Avenue, it has now been, I think, 3 weeks, 3.5 weeks since I met with members of the administration. I continue to stay in contact with the neighbors in that area. At the meeting, it was promised that basically an analysis or a report would be presented from the administration or written up from the administration with different parties who would add comments from public safety to DPW, including the city engineer, but it was going to be driven really by the administration, and we're still waiting for that. I'm also hoping, and we were told weeks ago that we would have legislation sent down for the administration in terms of prohibiting brake retarders. I would like to see that prior to the August recess, because every day that goes by, these people really can't enjoy sitting out in their yards on their front porch, and their quality of life has diminished greatly, and that's really unfair to them. So if we could follow up on the Third Avenue stuff, and I did send an email to the chief of staff. Yesterday, I had the opportunity to go down, unfortunately, to Church Avenue and Oak Street. There was a very, very bad accident there with a young gentleman on an ATV who was very badly hurt. And some of the neighbors were outside, and some of the comments that I received and witnessed just standing there about the quality of life issues, the out-of-town landlords, the drug houses. One person told me that a very good family is leaving Church Avenue because of all of that, the blight problems, and it's extremely frustrating. I don't want to blame anyone specifically, because this predates this administration and goes back quite some time. And I know that the current business administrator is working on some different proposals and different ideas. I want to see, and I hope to see, an actual comprehensive, cohesive strategy to deal with blight in the city. Since I've been on council, the flame has been lit several times. One example is Ken Bond. Everybody gets up in an uproar, and then it just falls to the wayside because no one is running, no one is carrying the ball here. It continually gets dropped. I've had the opportunity, I think I mentioned this a few weeks ago, during the pandemic, when there's really nothing to do, to drive through really every neighborhood in the city. And there are pockets in different neighborhoods through the city that are severely depressed and severely blighted, and they are only getting worse. And the city really needs to get more aggressive. It is, and not telling anyone here anything that they don't know, but it is not fair to the good families who keep their properties up. I do think we need to balance being very aggressive also with helping people who may need help and cutting their grass if they're elderly, whatever that program looks like. But Councilman Donahue can attest to this. We've talked about this now for a long time. We've attended meetings, we've attended work sessions with the previous administration. And again, the ball continues to get dropped. The fuse gets lit, but then it fades away. So I think what we need, and I'm confident in Dr. Rothchild, who is now the chairwoman of OECD, and I know who's working with the new business administrator, that we're going to get some kind of consistent, cohesive, comprehensive strategy and program. Because I am getting concerned. I even took a drive through Southside, even parts of Greenridge, Manuka, North Scranton, and it's very concerning. We need action. I know we're in the middle of a pandemic, but we can't just sit around and wait for the pandemic to end. I don't know how long the pandemic is going to last, but we're losing good families who have the opportunity to move out, and that's always very frustrating.
Councilman, if I could respond to some of what you said just real quick.
Sure, if you could just hang on one second. I just have one more thing to add on the Church Avenue thing. There were several addresses that were given to me by the neighbors out there, so I am going to get in touch with Mrs. Reed and ask the administration, the licensing and inspections department, and the police department to see if there's anything that they can do to crack down in this area. As I said, the neighbors are honestly held hostage by what's going on out there.
Just real quick, I just want to say, I do agree with all of what you just said. I did have calls earlier today with both the OECD director, Ms. Cipriani, and I also had a separate call with our business administrator, Mr. Dealey, and I discussed some of these issues with both of them, and Mr. Dealey provided me with some more updates. I wasn't able to attend the last meeting that they had this past week. And so things are moving forward. They're looking to set up a blight committee. They are taking these issues very seriously. They want to change the whole process around how we take in these complaints and then prioritize them. Even over the past weekend, I received more complaints. I just instead of mentioning them during the meeting, I just sent them all to Mrs. Reed and spoke with her about them because there's just too many of them. So we do have some widespread issues throughout the city, and I am looking to see when we can get Mr. Deely into one of our caucuses so that he can explain more details about the work that they're doing.
Thank you
And
so much.
he did inform me that the LIPS department did get some of their employees back. So, and that was just last week on the 3rd. I don't know if it's all of them within that department yet, but definitely some more to be able to help with all the complaints that are coming through that office.
That's great. Thank you so much, Dr. Rothchild. And as I stated, I am hopeful with the new administration and everybody working together. But again, I really want to see an actual comprehensive, cohesive strategy to deal with these issues, because it is. I was yesterday really concerned me, and I've been concerned for quite some time. So I'll look forward to those conversations. Also, 913, 915 Einan Street. This is an issue that was, again, it was brought up at least a year or two ago. I hear now, again, yesterday from the neighbors out there that the house is still in the same shape that it was a few years ago. Nothing has been done, according to the neighbors, by the property owner. There's a terrible smell coming from the house. A year or two ago, Judge Munley gave the owner a period of time to get the house up to code. And the ball has been, apparently the ball has been completely dropped by someone. I don't know if there was no follow through, but the conclusion that I think everyone came to when this was brought up a year or two ago is that the house needed to be demolished. The gentleman was given time to rehab the house. Again, the neighbors are stuck. The ones who pay their taxes, who are, again, good families, who have lived there their entire lives, they get stuck holding the bag. So I know that several of the neighbors have contacted the administration with questions as to where this is at. And I did ask Mrs. Reed to follow up with with the licensing and inspections department. It is really a disgrace. Newswatch 16 was out there a year and a half, 2 years ago, and here we are today, and nothing has been done. Councilman Schuster brought up the 1600 block of Sanderson Avenue. Again, I spoke to the neighbor there within the last few days. Major quality of life issues similar to what's going on Church Avenue. So we did send that to the licensing and inspections department. As for the fireworks, it's the worst since I've been on council, maybe in my lifetime. It's the worst that I've ever seen with fireworks in terms of the number of calls that we received, the number of emails, the number of calls maybe to the police department. Just a guess, it might be due to the pandemic and that people can't get out to the different fireworks shows. It seems like everybody rushed out and bought fireworks, and everyone put on a show at the same time on July 4th and even 2 weeks prior to that. And there's still people blowing off fireworks. But I agree with all of the correspondence that we received, all the calls that I received. Something has to be done for our people living in our neighborhoods, for our veterans. I have a veteran that lives by me who actually stopped by my house and said that, the PTSD does come back when it's out of control. And that people can understand on the 4th of July, but 2 weeks before and in a week or 2 weeks after is just unacceptable. People with pets, it's just, and small children, it really is, it's unacceptable. I agree with Councilman Donahue and other council people today who talked about in Solicitor Hayes Act 43 and the fact that has to be repealed. And I believe now it's going to the State House. Senator Blake has been trying to help us out to give us control over what goes on in our city. Right now, we're kind of, it's really not up to us. So Act 43 preempts us from regulating consumer fireworks via a municipal ordinance. So we do have something on our agenda tonight calling on the Commonwealth to reinstate the Fireworks Act of 1939. And I'm hopeful that along with increased patrols and increased enforcement, that will be helpful. So I think help should be on the way there. I asked for an update from OECD on the walkability study. We do have legislation on our agenda tonight applying for a grant, like a transportation type grant. And I had asked the OECD director, she told me at that time that they were researching the proposal by Mr. Speck and reviewing the resolution. They were unsure where the money was going to come from. I did put them in touch with former Mayor Wayne Evans, who was really involved heavily in the study at that time. So I don't think it's really gotten off the ground at all yet, but I'm hoping that now before the end of the year, they'll have some kind of movement, because I do believe the money is in place to get that done. I also requested today from the controller, John Murray, overtime report to see where we're at with the different departments. Also, Mrs. Reed, I know we've requested this before, but we continually get emails from residents in terms of stormwater management and where we're at with the Herbert, Rowland, and Grubik report that we were going to receive at some point. So if you could just touch base with Mr. King and Mr. Preamble from the DPW on a status on that report, that would be very helpful. And that's all I have for tonight. Mrs. Reed.
Thank you. 5B for introduction and ordinance, amending file of the council number 111, 2017 of the city of Scranton, adopting and implementing the Act 47 exit plan for the city of Scranton pursuant to the Financially Distressed Municipalities Act, and authorizing the mayor of the city of Scranton to issue an order directing the implementation of the Act 47 exit plan amendment, which will become effective upon adoption, attached hereto as Exhibit A, in accordance with the provisions of 53 PA CSA Section 11701.249, the Municipalities Financial Recovery Act.
Thank you, Mrs. Reed. At this time, I'll entertain a motion that item 5B be introduced into its proper committee.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
On the question?
On the question, I'm really interested to see the list from DCED on what they fund under Act 47 to sort of do a cost benefit analysis in terms of what we gain and what we lose by staying in Act 47. But this current exit plan was passed about 6 months before I got on council. But since I've been on council, it's just thing after thing that and it's just going back to what the discussion just was. You talk about it, but there is no action on it. Whether it's the payroll prep tax, the OPEC trust fund, a debt service policy, the list goes on. So what's the benefit of it? I mean, we actually have to act here. Over 70% of the voters in last year's election approved the payroll prep tax. And if you look over the course of the last 28 years and you say, has the total effect of being labeled a distressed city, is that a net positive or is that a net negative? And I think you can make the argument that it's more of a net negative than a net positive over the course of 28 years. So I will vote to introduce tonight because I think this issue still needs to be debated over the next couple of weeks. But as of right now, I can't, in good conscience, vote for an 18-month extension. I'd consider a 6-month extension due to the pandemic, but not 18 months. But that's where I'm at for right now, and I look forward to having this discussion moving forward over the next couple of weeks.
Anyone else on the question?
Yeah, I echo some of Mr. Councilman Donahue's remarks there. I would like to see this list of where we're at when it comes to the pros of remaining in Act 47. And I do think the city and other advocates for the payroll prep tax do need to speak with the school district. I think that's kind of been left where the conversation ended several months ago. So, I mean, if the extension is to wait on the district, I think some people that have some of that real data that was promised during the last administration need to meet with the administration of the school district. So the Scranton School Board does have that information to go over so they could make a sound judgment call on that as well.
Anyone else? I have a comment. I'm going to be voting for this legislation to introduce and then for final passage to extend the city's stay in Act 47 for 18 months for several reasons. First, as everyone knows, we've been distressed under Act 47 for 28 years. According to our recovery coordinator, the city was set to exit Act 47 this July prior to the pandemic occurring. The pandemic occurred, which obviously had a devastating effect on the city's finances. We saw that tonight by the presentation from the Pennsylvania Economy League, and before that with our business administrator stating that we're potentially looking at between a $6 to $10 million deficit. Voting against the 18-month extension would hurt, I believe it would hurt the city in several ways, and honestly would really defy logic at this point. It would be similar to throwing the baby out with the bathwater, or being in the middle of surgery on the operating table and just getting up and walking out of the hospital. Every municipality in the state is in the same boat here, through no fault of their own. Again, you can argue that there are issues with Act 47 as a whole. I've made that argument over the last few years. But to just want to get out of Act 47 for the sake of shedding the title of distress status when we're in the middle of a pandemic doesn't make any sense. There's several reasons why we should stay in Act 47 for 18 months. One of the major reasons is the recommendation in our 3-year exit plan was a transition to a payroll preparation tax and the elimination of the despised business privilege and mercantile tax. The transition cannot occur if the city is out of Act 47. So if everyone on council voted against this legislation to amend the exit plan and to stay in for 18 months to give us more time to make the transition, if we all voted against it, we would not be able to transition from the business privilege and mercantile tax to the payroll prep tax. This recommendation was put to referendum in the fall of November 2019, and the people of Scranton overwhelmingly voted in favor of the measure. Again, if we were to vote against this legislation tonight or for final passage, it would mean that the votes of roughly 70% of Scrantonians who expressed their support for the transition would be negated. And it would really set up an unnecessary additional roadblock on the path to modernizing our tax system. The transition to a payroll prep tax would do several things. Number one, it would encourage business development, which we desperately need in the city. It would enable a more predictable, efficient collection of taxes, which we also need. And it would expand the city's tax base to businesses that are currently exempt from the business privilege and mercantile tax. As everyone on this board knows, and many people throughout the city, the current business privilege and mercantile tax has driven existing businesses out of the city over the years and served as a strong deterrent for new business coming into Scranton. Have there been challenges in implementing the transition, specifically with the school district? Certainly, there has been many challenges. I know in speaking today to Pat Sheridan and Carl Deely, they have been speaking extensively with Mr. Laffey from the school district. Those conversations are ongoing, and I'm very confident that we will be able to make this transition. 18 months gives us the opportunity to do that. Without the 18 months, we don't even have the opportunity because we can't make the transition without being in Act 47. That is the law. So that would be really the main reason. The second reason is it's really an inopportune time to make any kind of determination on the long-term financial position of the city in the middle of a pandemic with all of the adverse effects that it brings. 18 months should be enough time to work with the state officials and DCD to reevaluate our distress status in the future when conditions have hopefully stabilized. Councilman Donahue mentioned maybe doing 6 months. I don't agree. According to what Pell said tonight, I don't even think that's possible according to the law. I think it has to be 18 months or nothing. I think 18 months, why wouldn't we do that? It gives us time to reevaluate everything, and it gives us time to make that transition from the business privilege and mercantile tax to the payroll preparation tax. So again, the positives outweigh the negatives. If it's just about shedding the title of distressed, well, we've been distressed for 28 years. So, I mean, shedding it in the middle of a pandemic to me doesn't make any sense. I think for whatever benefits there might be, we should stay in, and I think we should do the logical thing do the right thing for the citizens of Scranton. Anyone else on?
I
the
would
question?
just,
Yes.
I would just like to make two real quick comments. I don't think it's just in terms of voting against it just to shed the distress status. I mean, there's a possibility that we lose $3.2 million this year and $3.2 million next year in triple LFP. You know, that's one financial aspect I think that needs to be weighed, and it's not 100% one way or another, but it's still a possibility. And then in terms of payroll prep, I mean, we were in a meeting, I think it was the beginning of March, right before this all hit, and we basically had set today as the deadline to have legislation in front of council to go ahead with the conversion of the payroll prep from the business privilege and mercantile. So it's not something that needs to take 18 months. And then if you wait a year, you're also decreasing your base number, because that base number next year would have to be based off the collections this year.
Right, but if we leave, we don't even have that. If we don't take the 18-month extension, which I believe every other distressed municipality in the state is going to do, we don't have that option. The option is totally off the table. I get what you're saying, Councilman Donahue, but you know, to leave is to not even have, then we don't have any option. I mean, we could argue over the semantics of hopefully they get it done sooner rather than later. But again, if we leave and we will vote against this, then that option is off the table. And as I said, 70% of the city said that they want to see this happen for all the reasons that I just mentioned. So you can.
So it should have been done already.
Right, but it's not. And again, if we leave Act 47, then we don't even have the option. So I think just from a logical perspective, you would want to give yourself the option and have this new administration work with the school district to hopefully get it done. But to leave, the option is off the table, which, I mean, I think we'd be putting a hurdle up that in front of us that is just unnecessary.
I just wanted to add, I understand how frustrating that this is for the city when we've already been in distress status for how long, and to put it off for a longer period of time. It's the last thing that I would want to do, frankly, as well. But you know, given what has happened with COVID-19, we're in a very different place than we imagined we would be. And the 18-month extension, I see it as not just being because of the hopeful transition to the payroll tax, but because of the fear of there being a second wave, but also the unknown as to what will happen in the next few months with revenue loss and with the city. If we get shut down again and we lose even more money, this is sort of the last thing on my mind as to exiting Act 47, because we're going to have some other priorities at that point to ensure the financial stability of the city. And so, you know, I think I'm more comfortable with the additional time for fear of a second wave, and like I said, fear of the unknown with our finances. We have estimates, but I mean, those estimates can change. That's all that they are. So that's where I stand.
Councilman McAndrew, do you have anything to add?
Yes, I'll be voting yes for the extension because of circumstances, but that doesn't mean I'm not happy with the process or you know, the length of Act 47, the regards to the payroll prep tax that was discussed with only a few people since 2015. The board, when I was on the school board, we weren't even included in them conversation, but it was expected to just fall in place on the final hour, which I had a problem with. And, you know, and I remember had at least one meeting where I asked, well, why don't we phase it in like Pittsburgh did? And I was told by a business administrator in Scranton, I don't know that answer. Well, so like I said, I'll vote for the extension because of the circumstances, but I'm not happy with the whole process. And I hope we have the same conversation 18 months from now where we're going to say, oh, you know, we need more time, or we didn't do this because of that. All right, that's just where I'm at. Thank you.
Okay, anyone else on the question? All those in favor of introduction signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All right.
Opposed? The ayes have it and so moved.
5C for introduction and ordinance, amending file of the council number 22, 2014, an ordinance entitled, an ordinance amending file of the council number 26, 2013, an ordinance entitled, amending file of the council number 22, 2006, entitled, authorizing and approving the designation of parking spaces for certain City of Scranton personnel in and along Dix Court, the parking area in the rear of City of Scranton Municipal Building, and a parking lot along Mulberry Street adjacent to Scranton Fire Headquarters, and authorizing the City of Scranton Police Department to enforce the parking designations as reflected in the attached schematic by redesignating certain employee parking spaces from individual names to letters from A to Z as reflected in the attached schematic.
Thank you, Mrs. Reed. At this time, I'll entertain a motion that item 5C be introduced into its proper committee.
So moved.
Second.
On the question? All those in favor of introduction signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed? The ayes have it and so moved.
5D for introduction, a resolution calling on the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania to reinstate the Fireworks Act of 1939.
At this time, I'll entertain a motion that item 5D be introduced into its proper committee.
So moved.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
On the question? On the question, just to reiterate, again, we've been kind of besieged by complaints from residents throughout the city of Scranton regarding the fireworks issues, not only on July 4th, but previous to that and even up and until today. I support this legislation calling on the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania to reinstate the Fireworks Act. It really will give us as a municipality more control over regulating the fireworks issues that we're having. And it will prohibit people from going out and buying these commercial grade fireworks, which in all reality, there should be a professional that is helping to blow these off. The second thing is that, you know, in the city, I believe you have to be 150 feet away from a building or a structure to blow off these fireworks. It's very hard to find an area in the city where you can be 150 feet away from a structure unless you're in the middle of the woods or in the middle of a baseball field. I think we have to look at that as well. I know Wilkes-Barre is taking some measures that I think we might be able to look at. But I think the first step is to definitely call on the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania and our state legislature to get on board and help our elderly people, our veterans who suffer from PTSD, people who have reached out to us who have pets that are not right for weeks after, as we all know. And this is something that's very serious. And I think council is making the right move here by voting on this legislation. Anyone else on the question?
Just to add to Councilman Gaughan's statement about, you know, being 150 feet away, it is also illegal to set off fireworks on any city property. So any city park or city-owned baseball field that might be 150 feet away from any occupied structure is still illegal because it's considered city property.
Yeah, as we're having this conversation, about to vote on this piece of legislation, I'm hearing some fireworks in the background, just kind of further away. So I don't think you'd be able to hear them on camera. But yeah, this has been insane. It's all hours of the day and night. You know, it's really affecting people's quality of life. It's you know, really difficult, I think, for veterans or people experiencing PTSD to deal with. You know, people are fearful for their homes if they're going to be set on fire by the nearby fireworks. So I am obviously in favor of this to be able to call on legislators, but I think we need help from the public to also contact their state legislators to repeal this act. And also, if people can remember to call the non-emergency line, you know, they might be thinking that, well, someone else might have already called who's in the neighborhood, but if someone hasn't, then the police might not be aware of it. And so it's, if you're hearing them and if it's a problem, then make sure to call that line so that someone can get out there and at least give out a fine to whoever's setting them off.
Thank you. Anyone else on the question? All those in favor of introduction signify by saying aye.
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 All right.
Opposed? The ayes have it and so moved.
Sixth order, 6A, reading by title, file to council number 11, 2020. An ordinance approving the transfer of a restaurant liquor license owned by Oak Street Express LLC, 610 North Main Street, Taylor, Lackawanna County, Pennsylvania, 18517, restaurant liquor license number R-3114 to Aradia Bev Beer LLC, 401 Wyoming Avenue, Scranton, Lackawanna County, Pennsylvania, 18503, as required by the Pennsylvania Liquor Control Board.
You've heard reading by title of item 6A. What is your pleasure?
I move that item 6A pass reading by title.
Second.
On the question? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Aye. Opposed? The ayes have it and so moved.
Seventh order, 7A, for consideration by the Committee on Community Development for Adoption. Resolution number 40, 2020, ratifying and approving the execution and submission of a grant application by the City of Scranton to the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, acting through the Department of Health, in an amount of up to $20,000 for the project to be known as Active Transportation Plan, and authorizing the mayor and other appropriate city officials of the City of Scranton, Pennsylvania, to accept the grant if successful and execute and enter into grant contract and commitment letter with the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, and to utilize the grant for such project.
What is the recommendation of the chairperson for the Committee on Community Development?
As chair for the Committee on Community Development, I recommend final passage of item 7A.
Is there a second?
Second.
On the question? Roll call, please.
Mr. Schuster,
Yes.
Mr. McAndrew,
Yes.
Dr. Rothchild,
Yes.
Mr. Donahue,
Yes.
Mr. Gaughan.
Yes, I hereby declare item 7A legally and lawfully adopted.
7B, for consideration by the Committee on Community Development for Adoption, resolution number 41, 2020, ratifying and approving the submission and execution of a grant application by the City of Scranton to the Mayor's Innovation Project, Healthy Babies, Bright Futures, Bright Cities, for a grant in the amount of $5,000 for the project to be known as Scranton Playground Pals, keeping our kids safe and healthy, and authorizing the mayor and other appropriate city officials of the City of Scranton, PA, to accept the grant and execute and enter into a grant agreement to accept and utilize the grant in the amount of $5,000 awarded by the Mayor's Innovation Project.
What is the recommendation of the chairperson for the Committee on Community Development?
As chair for the Committee on Community Development, I recommend final passage of item 7B.
Is there a second?
Second.
On the question? Roll call, please.
Mr. Schuster,
Yes.
Mr. McAndrew,
Yes.
Dr. Rothchild,
Yes.
Mr. Donahue,
Yes.
Mr. Gaughan.
Yes, I hereby declare item 7B legally and lawfully adopted.
7C, for consideration by the Committee on Community Development for Adoption, resolution number 42, 2020, authorizing the mayor and other appropriate city officials to apply for and execute a grant for the Redevelopment Assistance Capital Program through the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania's Office of the Budget in the amount of $2 million, accepting and dispersing the grant if the application is successful, and coordinate the use of the grant funds with Lace Building Affiliates LP for the project to be named the Scranton Lace Adaptive Use Project.
What is the recommendation of the chairperson for the Committee on Community Development?
As chair for the Committee on Community Development, I recommend final passage of item 7C.
Second.
On the question? Roll call, please.
Mr. Schuster,
Yes.
Mr. McAndrew,
Yes.
Dr. Rothchild,
Yes.
Mr. Donahue,
Yes.
Mr. Gaughan.
Yes, I hereby declare item 7C legally and lawfully adopted.
7D for consideration by the Committee on Community Development for Adoption, Resolution number 43, 2020, authorizing the mayor and other appropriate city officials to accept a grant from the Redevelopment Assistance Capital Program through the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania's Office of the Budget in the amount of $250,000 and coordinate the use of the grant funds with Scranton Cherry LP or their designee for the project to be named the Scranton Counseling Center Project.
What is the recommendation of the chairperson for the Committee on Community Development?
As chair for the Committee on Community Development, I recommend final passage of item 7D.
Second.
On the question? Roll call, please.
Mr. Schuster,
Yes.
Mr. McAndrew,
Yes.
Dr. Rothchild,
Yes.
Mr. Donahue,
Yes.
Mr. Gaughan.
Yes, I hereby declare item 7D legally and lawfully adopted.
7E for consideration by the Committee on Finance for Adoption, Resolution number 44, 2020, authorizing the mayor and other appropriate city officials to accept the award of grant funds from the Willery Foundation in the amount of $50,000 to undertake a study to evaluate tax policy, billing, and collections with the goal of increasing collection rates, strengthening internal controls, eliminating waste, and providing tax relief for Scranton residents.
What is the recommendation of the chairperson for the Committee on Finance?
As a chairperson for the Committee on Finance, I recommend final passage of item 7E.
Second.
On the question?
On the question, does the administration at this time know what firm is going to be conducting this review?
Based on the backup legislation, I don't believe so unless they chose somebody, but that's a good question. Well, I don't think they could have chose somebody without the money in hand, but I think we should pose that question to them. It's a good question.
All right, can we send that correspondence over?
Sure. Mrs. Reed, can you inquire with the business administrator?
Of course.
And then also, although this is going to be a review to study the current taxing structure, are they going to include in this a review of that hard data for the payroll tax conversion, or is the payroll tax conversion going to be part of that review? Do we know that?
I don't know for sure. I think that would probably be included with that, since they're talking about evaluating billing collections with the goal of increasing collection rates, but I'm not 100% positive. But I think that's something else that we can inquire about.
Yeah, so if we could add that as well.
Sure.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Anyone else on the question? Roll call, please.
Mr. Schuster,
Yes.
Mr. McAndrew,
Yes.
Dr. Rothchild,
Yes.
Mr. Donahue,
Yes.
Mr. Gaughan.
Yes, I hereby declare item 7E legally and lawfully adopted.
7F for consideration by the Committee on Rules for Adoption, Resolution number 45, 2020, encouraging the United States Senate to pass local government fiscal assistance and calling on the United States Senate to adopt the funding enhancements to the federal medical assistance percentages as provided in the HEROES Act, HR 6800.
As chairperson for the Committee on Rules, I recommend final passage of item 7F.
Second.
On the question? On the question, I just want to reiterate two things here. I've spoken about this the last few weeks. I can't reiterate and stress how important it is for everyone who may be watching this council meeting and anyone else in the city of Scranton to contact your state senators, your state legislators, your federal legislators, Senator Toomey, Senator Casey, Congressman Cartwright. We need to make sure that they understand that the citizens of Scranton, if we don't get help from the federal government, your taxes are going to go up. Your city taxes are going to go up, school district taxes are going to go up, and quite possibly your county taxes will go up. And when I look at what's going on throughout the country, the airline industry is getting a major bailout. The travel industry gets a major bailout. All of these corporations and businesses are getting bailouts from the federal government, while cities like Scranton are left still, with this legislation kind of still in flux, is still being left out in the cold to deal with this problem by ourselves. And that eventually, if nothing changes, is going to be transferred on the backs of the hardworking people of the city of Scranton. So I don't think that we as Scrantonians and we as elected officials are asking for a bailout. You're giving billions of dollars, as I said, to Boeing, to different companies throughout the travel industry. That's a bailout. We're asking for the federal government to reinvest the hard-earned tax dollars back into our city to help us avert a financial disaster. We had our business administrator in 3 weeks ago. We're going to have a potential deficit between $6 to $10 million. Money is not flowing from trees in the city of Scranton, as everybody knows. It has to come from someplace, whether we borrow or whether we have to increase taxes. And it may be hard to understand the plight of the working middle class people when you're on your perch in Washington, D.C., but this is real life. All of us on council have to make very difficult decisions, and staring down the barrel of a $6 to $10 million deficit through no fault of anybody's because of the public health crisis, and then having to basically beg our federal legislators to include cities in this next round of funding is ridiculous. So what I'm saying is we need your help. We need you to contact your federal legislators. We need you to call them. We need you to email them. We need you to write them. We're going to send this legislation to our senators and our congressmen. Councilman Donahue and I were on the phone with Senator Casey's office, who Senator Casey has been more than helpful and wants this funding to get to the city of Scranton. We need to convince our Republican friends like Senator Toomey to make sure that he does not leave cities like Scranton and our hardworking middle-class citizens in Scranton out in the cold. So again, it's important. We're going to send this to them to make sure they have it. I know the mayor's requested a meeting with Senator Toomey. We have requested a face-to-face meeting with Senator Toomey to make sure that he understands, and all of our federal legislators understand, that if we don't get the funding, it's going to be the people who suffer, and people are already suffering. So we don't want to add to the burden. We've been told, well, you got funding through the county. That's true, but it's for expenditures. It's the revenue where we're taking the hit, where we're going to take the hit. So that's where we're going to need the funding. So again, we really need the people of Scranton to step up, to annoy as much as you can our offices of our federal legislators, and make sure that they understand that if they don't provide assistance, we are not going to forget. And from now until this HEROES bill is hopefully passed, we're going to make as much noise as possible. Councilman Donahue, Councilman McAndrew, Councilman Schuster, Dr. Rothchild, we are going to do everything that we possibly can, along with Mayor Cognetti, to make sure that we're fighting on behalf of the people of this city, because this pandemic is no one's fault. And we can't allow the travel industry and the airline industry to be bailed out with billions of dollars and then be expected to just raise people's taxes and have them pay for it when they've been paying their taxes their entire lives. So that's
and
all.
just to add on to Mr. Gaughan's point is local and state governments across the country make up about 10 to 11% of GDP. If there was any other industry throughout the country that was facing the financial hardships that state and local governments are, and they made up 10% of GDP, funding would be provided in no time. I know a part of the debate in Washington is going to be whether another stimulus check should be a part of the rules. I mean, if they want to send out a stimulus check so they put 45's name on a check before the election, I mean, people might as well put that in savings because that's where your taxes are going to go up next year. If we face a $10 million deficit on the high end of our projections, it doesn't matter whether we're in Act 47 or not. There's absolutely no way we make up a $10 million shortfall without severe cuts to essential services.
Thank you. Anyone else on the question?
Yeah, I echo all of your sentiments, but let's not forget who bailed out these billion-dollar companies. Who paid for it? We did. So in turn, and I know you mentioned the airlines, but cruise lines who don't pay taxes in the United States got billions of dollars in bailouts. So it's since we paid for that, I think we're entitled, or I shouldn't say entitled, we're owed some money. So I agree. We have to reach out. We got to put the pressure on, especially at the federal level, so we can get the same type of, if you want to call it bailout, whatever. Thank you.
I agree. Anyone else on the question? Roll call, please.
Mr. Schuster,
Yes.
Mr. McAndrew,
Yes.
Dr. Rothchild,
Yes.
Mr. Donahue,
Yes.
Mr. Gaughan.
Yes, I hereby declare item 7F legally and lawfully adopted. If there's no further business, I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
I just want to say something that I didn't get a chance to say earlier. Kyle made a great point, or sorry, Mr. Donahue made a great point earlier saying, of course we can do our part and take our own recyclables to say Fiegelman's, which is located in the city. Why don't we take the trucks that are picking up the recyclables right now, or think about actually taking them trucks to Fiegelman's, which is a city-owned business. That's all I have. Thanks.
Thank you. If there's no one else has anything, no further business, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
This meeting's adjourned. Thank you, everyone.
Yeah.